Good afternoon. Welcome to the Tinian Lecture. When we were picking our topic for the Tinian Lecture, and we came up with OMT in sports medicine, it was actually like our short list as far as like who we wanted to speak and who wanted to bring in. And the first person I thought of was Dr. Lee Rice, who I had become familiar with when I was at Western University, because he just was a fantastic person to listen to and inspire the students. Well, you'll see why in a few minutes. But so he is here. And Dr. Rice is the founder of the Life Wellness Institute, provides the guiding principle and vision for the company. With more than 30 years of experience as a family and sports medicine physician, Dr. Rice is one of the premier medical experts on wellness both in the United States and internationally. He has authored numerous medical texts and journal articles in the areas of wellness and sports medicine. Dr. Rice received his Doctor of Osteopathy from Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine in 1973. We're very excited to bring him home for this presentation. In 1979, he established San Diego Sports Medicine and Family Health, which at that time was one of the only facilities in the country that applied sports medicine theories to the lay population. He has been a team physician for numerous professional and amateur teams, including the San Diego Chargers, the San Diego Clippers, the San Diego Gulls, the USA Olympic Volleyball Team, and numerous America's Cup syndicates. Currently, Dr. Rice is a clinical professor at Western University of Health Sciences, the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, and San Diego State University. Dr. Rice is a fellow of the American Academy of Family Physicians, the American College of Sports Medicine, and the American Osteopathic Academy of Sports Medicine. Without further ado, Dr. Rice, thank you for being here. Big round of applause.
Great. Okay. Thanks, buddy. Got to give hugs. As a matter of fact, everybody stand up for just a minute, please. Come on. All right. And I'd like everybody just to give somebody else a hug. Just give him a hug, right? Go ahead, it won't kill you. Give him a hug. He needs a hug. There we go. Okay, that's enough. Have a seat. In a group this big, that usually starts 3 or 4 new relationships. We've learned that what you've just done is increase the brain levels of oxytocin and the receptor site stimulation of the oxytocin receptor sites, which prepares you for a feeling of safety and trust, actually generosity also, peace, comfort. And I want you to be comfortable as we talk this morning. You have no idea, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, how grateful I am to be here, able to share it with you this afternoon now, I guess. It's morning in San Diego still. Some thoughts that I have. This is where it did start for me. I'm grateful for Dr. Tinning. He sent me a nice email yesterday wishing me well, saying that he couldn't be here, but his vision and his wife Janet's to fund a talk that each year sort of supported osteopathic principles and thought and theory was pretty visionary. And we all should be very much appreciative of that. I remember in 1958, my dad had a restaurant, and he had a chef, and he was carving up a cow, and he called me over. I was sweeping the parking lot, and he said, "Look at this," and it was a hip. And I looked at that glistening hip, and the femur, and the acetabulum, and how it all fit together, synovial fluid making it smooth and no rough spots, the articular cartilage perfect in every aspect. And I thought, this is a miracle. He showed me how the muscle tendon units moved it and how it all worked together. And it was the most fascinated thing I've ever seen in my life in terms of just beauty, synchrony, balance, precision, efficiency. And I thought, I need to know more about this human body. It's unbelievable. And so my dream growing up was always to be a physician. And then one day in 1969, I got a call from my dad. I was at UC Santa Barbara in graduate school, and he said, "You've been accepted to Kirksville College of Osteopathy and Surgery." And that call changed my life. It meant I was finally going to get to have the dream that I wanted. And so when I came here, I didn't know what to expect. Clearly we didn't. My wife and I actually, Mary, where's Mary? There she is. Everybody give Mary a little hand. That was going on 46 years ago. She's still my first wife. And we didn't know what to expect. We drove here on our honeymoon, basically, and it snowed in Thanksgiving week, and we were so excited. We built this giant 3-ball snowman and dressed them all up and put a carrot in his nose and everything. And it melted in April. We thought, oh, maybe we've made a mistake here, you know. But I remember lots of things about coming here, from how intimidating it could be to start out, to I don't know if you know the lore of Mad Dog Stookie, not Stookie, but Snyder. Mad Dogs. He had a face that looked like a bulldog. He was our anatomy professor. And the very first day he came in, and he had this gruff look on his face, and he kind of tapped his hand on the thing. Go. He says, "How would you like the job in 4 years to take you and turn you into a physician? How would you like to have to do that?" And nobody ever spoke up to him. Everybody was intimidated. He had this growl. He just stared right through you like a laser. And the first day of class, he's given this talk, and we had the seating that wasn't as nice as you all have now right here, but it was a stair-step seating with tile floor. And I was just married, and I'm sitting there on the aisle, and I'm playing with my wedding ring. And I was taking it on and off because I was not used to wearing it, and it slipped out of my hands, and I'm about halfway up. And it makes this giant clang on this floor, and it goes bing and then rolls and bing and rolls and bing. And he stops what he's saying, and he's just staring. And everybody's going, "Oh my God, the poor guy who did it." And it rolls and rolls and rolls and stops right at his feet by the podium. And then he just waits. And I had to kind of go down there and pick up my wedding ring and slouch back. And he made some cryptic comment. He says, "That must have been a Freudian slip." So I remember those days. And I remember when my wife just graduated, she was going to put me through medical school. That was going to be our deal. And so we drove to Kirksville, Missouri, and she had all these jobs in LA and Southern California for corporate development jobs. And so there weren't a lot of corporations here in Kirksville. And the best job she had was at this factory outside of town which made gloves, plastic gloves. And the job was, for 10 hours a day, you put them on one machine and it blew them up. And if they popped, you put them in this pile. If they didn't pop, you put them over here. That was the job. And I remember Dr. Chornock, who ran our lab and the hospital lab, coming to me and taking pity on my wife and many other wives. And he gave her a job in the lab as a student learner. And she worked in the lab for 4 years, as did I. My job was drawing blood from patients that had hospital orders the night before. So every morning at 5:30, I'd get up and draw blood. She'd go to work in the lab. And many people like Dr. Chornock were instrumental in forming my view of what life was all about, and took pity on us. People like Dr. Wayne English, who was a mentor of mine, still is, taught us what it was like to be an osteopathic physician. People like Dr. Stookie, who took us out to his place at what's the name of that lake? Spring Lake, and fed us these wonderful things. They were the greatest things I'd ever eaten in my life, I thought, until he taught us at the end what Rocky Mountain oysters really were. So we had fun. We had fun. And what I wanted to be was the greatest subspecialist in the world. And I tried on all these hats. You know, I tried on this hat and that hat, and I finally decided on a pediatric cardiac surgeon, because I figured that was about as specialized and super as you could get, and nobody would ever question your authenticity or your scientific validity or your clinical acumen if you were that, right? And then I had a friend at UCLA who said, you know, you might want to consider this, Lee. He was at medical school there. He was a fraternity brother of mine, and he said, in our whole university medical system, we have one pediatric cardiac surgeon, and he can never go on vacation. He says, is that the life you want? And I thought, well, maybe not. I'll be something else. So when I graduated from here, I went on to the Navy. I actually joined the Navy, and they had a senior medical program because you could join in your senior year. They paid the tuition for your last year, then you owed them some time, and the draft was on for the Vietnam War then at any rate. So I was in the Navy, did my internship and family medicine residency in the Navy at Camp Pendleton and Balboa Naval Hospital, both in San Diego. And really what I wanted to do, though, was be a specialist. And so I applied, actually. Had 3 rotations at Balboa Naval Hospital in their orthopedic surgical department, and I'd sort of gotten good friends with the head of orthopedic surgery there, and he promised me, he said, Lee, I'm going to take you, you're going to be my first resident in the match. And due to a clerical error in the machine, the paperwork that I got to fill out for the residency match, it listed the wrong date. And so I called up about 2 weeks in advance, and I said, I just got a question on how to fill out this one thing. I want to know what you're asking. And she says, why are you asking? And I said, well, because I'm turning in my sheet. And she said, well, the deadline was last Friday. And I said, you're kidding me. And she said, no. I said, well, I spent 2 years of rotations trying to get all this set up. I said, it says right here the date is 2 weeks from now. She said, well, I'm sorry, that's just a typo. I said, well, you fix it. You know, it's not my problem. She says, I'm sorry, the computer's locked. There's nothing we can do. So she said, what you can do is you can wait and see if anybody doesn't match, and then you can maybe try there. And I said, well, is there any orthopedic residency program in the entire military service that doesn't match? She said, no. So I said, okay, great. So she said, well, there is this one thing you might consider doing. They're starting a brand new specialty. It's going to be called family medicine. And they're starting a program at Camp Pendleton Naval Hospital. It's a new program. It hasn't been really widely publicized. It probably won't fill because not many people know about it. Why don't you go there? You could spend a year, waste maybe just a year of your time, but then you could transfer the next year into the second year, or part of the second year of the orthopedic program. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went there, and they started telling me about their program. And when we drove up, the hospital was based around Lake O'Neill. It was a one-story set of Quonset huts, looked like a MASH unit, right, built for World War II. It was about the farthest thing from high ivory tower, intellectual curiosity, research hospital organization that you could ever imagine. As we drove up, there's patients in their hospital robes fishing in Lake O'Neill, sitting on the bank. It was the summer. We go up there, and it's hot, so the doors on both ends, these long Quonset hut kind of deals. And I go into the medical ICU, and both doors were open, and I walk up in there, and there's a duck walking down the hallway in the ICU. And I go, this is a long way from what I wanted as a highly qualified research institution kind of a deal. But he took me around anyway, the chief of the program, and he taught me what residency was going to be like, and they were going to teach you all the things that they could teach you about people and about families and about family interaction. And it was going to be very behaviorally oriented and very organized towards holistic care. All the stuff that I'd been hearing at Kirksville all this time, but didn't really fully appreciate for myself. And how you're going to get trained in OBGYN and psychiatry and orthopedics and neurology and on and on and on. And at the end, you're going to be qualified to take care of 90% of things that happen with all people. And I saw that, and I saw these guys. I like to fish, fishing out in the lake. And I saw the duck, and I had this, what I call now a cosmic goose. It was kind of like, you know, this is who I am. This is me. This is who I've always been. I was trying to be something that I thought the world would appreciate or say was good, and I didn't have the courage to just be what I was. And when it finally hit me, this is me, I never looked back. and all the things about osteopathic medicine, the philosophy, the principles, the practice, the holism of it, the way that we treat people and not knees, that we treat whole family environments and not diseased livers or sore throats, that was what was meaningful to me. And so my career was sort of looking at family medicine as an osteopathic physician, and the uniqueness and the truth and the validity of that kind of practice has borne itself out so much. And what I will tell you today is scientifically what we know works for health and prevents disease. And I know many of you are dental students too, but everything goes hand in hand. One thing affects the other. And if you can appreciate that now and the strength and truth of what it is, it'll make you so much better overall. And I'll give you one caveat. And the one caveat is this. First, you have to do it for yourself. How many of you, by show of hands, have written down, for example, a personal life mission statement? A few. All right. This is something to think about. I think it's a big mistake because I talk to executives all the time. We have an executive wellness center. I go into corporations and speak to executives and executive C-level suite people. And I ask them the same question. And it's amazing to me how many people have never really defined themselves by saying, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, these are my core values, and this is my life purpose. Because as Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there. So when you're making big decisions in your life, how do you know whether this decision is the right decision for you? Is it consistent with your values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And I'll fast forward a little bit. What I see now is I see corporate executives and their families that are dysfunctional. They have high risk factors for their health. They're not happy. They don't have that core value system thing worked out, right? They don't have it figured out, but they all know what to do to be healthy. If I were to ask them, what do you need to do to be healthy? They'd say, well, you need to eat right, you need to exercise, you need to have stress reduction techniques, I know that. You know, you need to have good relationships, all that's good. And I see these people that have the power to do it, they've got the money to do it, they've got the time to do it, but yet they don't do it. And the question is, why don't they do it? And one of the answers is they've never had that look in the mirror, you know, where that courageous honesty conversation where they said, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and everything I do ought to be aligned with that. Because here's the way it works out. To the degree that you're not clear on it, number one, or two, to the degree that your behaviors are not consistent with your values, that's the degree to which you have stress in your life. And the degree to which you have stress in your life is the degree to which you're going to be running away from your feelings and trying to suppress those feelings to be happy, thinking that happiness is over here somewhere. And the truth is, it's an inside job. We have everything we need internally to be happy. The world can't give it to us. And osteopathic philosophy has known that all along. Andrew Taylor Still knew that, right? We have everything we need for healing inside. It's already here. We just have to accept it, be grateful for it, open up and tap into it. And if we do that for ourselves, we can be a meaningful presence in the lives of our patients. But if we don't do that for ourselves, we're a shadow of our real self, right? We're a bastardized, homogenized, sanitized version of the real deal. And you're going to have less respect. They're going to relate to you not quite as well. They're not going to trust you quite as much. You know, in the old days, I'd say, Doc, I've had so many doctors tell me, he said, my doctor, he weighed 40 pounds too much. He's smoking a cigarette. He's got literally had a cigarette ashtray on his desk, and he's telling me to stop smoking and start exercising. So I've got a favorite doctor who says his father used to tell him, if I don't have a nickel, I can't give you a nickel. Can't give you a nickel if I don't have a nickel. And what he was saying was, you can't give somebody else something that you don't already have yourself. If you haven't given it to yourself, then you're not whole enough to really fully give it away without some strings attached, right? So that's the deal. So what have we learned? And I'll tell you, I'll sort of fast forward now to what we've learned about medicine, about osteopathic medicine, and about wellness medicine. We've learned this, that our nation is in a real healthcare crisis right now. And I brought some things, I always like to kind of look at the latest literature, et cetera. There's some things that I just thought I'd quote for you so you don't think I'm just making this stuff up. This is San Diego. I'm on the board for the Heart Association in San Diego. 3 behaviors cause 4 diseases that end result in 50% of all deaths in San Diego. And I don't think this is too different or dissimilar from the rest of the country. No physical activity, poor diet, and smoking lead to cancer, heart disease and stroke, type 2 diabetes, and pulmonary disease. And those 4 things, 50% of deaths in San Diego. It's behavior. 45% of adults have at least one of 3 diagnosed or undiagnosed chronic conditions: hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes. 1 in 8 has at least 2 of those conditions. And interestingly, 3% of all adults have all 3 combined. Action point: those who adhered to sufficient physical activity, a healthy diet, limited alcohol, no smoking, had a 57% reduced risk of heart disease and stroke, and a 57 and 67% reduced risk factor for a fatal heart attack. Now, if I had a pill that I could give you or manufacture that would give you that kind of benefit for preventing cardiovascular disease, I'd be a billionaire and I'd take you all with me somewhere. But we don't have anything that's that good. And when you add, besides those things, a good night's sleep to the equation, we reduce heart attacks by 65% and heart attack deaths by 83%. Very few things cause very big benefit. Cancers. We used to think cancer was just bad luck. If you're genetically prone, you're going to get cancer, nothing you can do about it. World Health Organization, 2014. Lifestyle behaviors that lead to cancer include smoking tobacco, drinking alcohol, overweight or obesity, and lack of exercise. Cutting tobacco is the single most powerful way to prevent many deadly cancers. 1 in 3 deaths caused by cancer is related to obesity, poor nutrition, or physical inactivity. So it's our behaviors that are changing our health outcomes. Interestingly, how many of you know what the first leading cause of premature death in our country is? Take a guess. I'm sorry? No. Number 1, driving accidents is number 4 or 5, depending on how you look at it, but it is way up there. The number 1 cause of premature death in our country is still cardiovascular disease. It's heart attacks. Number 2, cancer, all types of cancer combined. You'll never guess number 3. Medical care. Medical care. The number 3rd leading cause of premature death in the U.S. right now, up to 440,000 cases a year, are due to errors in medical treatment, slips of the knife, lack of communication between hospital or healthcare workers, wrong drug, side effects of drug, all those kinds of things. I go to the doctor trying to be healthy and end up having bad things happen. When I was here, we had George C. Scott was in a movie called Hospital. Look it up sometime. It shows you all the terrible things that can happen when you go get health care. So we can be, like Pogo said, we've met the enemy and it's us. We can be the problem. And we can also be the answer, but there's some things we have to do to really become the answer. This is a study from Cardiff University. 5 factors were integral to avoiding disease: exercise, not smoking, low body weight, healthy diet, low alcohol. Am I sounding like a broken record? That caused all those things together a 60% decline in, guess what, dementia. And you know the most significant thing that we can do to prevent dementia prematurely and even Alzheimer's progression? Physical exercise. We used to think it was learning a foreign language, learning, funny new things, keeping your mind active. The most important thing we can do to prevent the mind from decaying prematurely is physical exercise. Ever heard of the rule of the artery is supreme? Everything we're learning is that the more open our cardio system is and our vascular system, the less inflammation we have in our membranes of the arteries, the the less plaque we will have, the more oxygen we're going to supply to every organ in our body, and the more waste products we're going to carry away, and the more the circulatory system is efficient and effective. Every study known now shows that we have less cancer, we have less diabetes, we have less dementia, we have less aging of every organ that we have. We think about it for coronary disease because when we have a coronary attack, we die. But that same process is aging every organ in our body unless we have synergy of all the things that can keep us healthy. And how are we doing as a country in healthcare? Well, this shows that out of 11 Western industrialized countries, we rank last in healthcare outcomes. In the world, we rank 36th in healthcare outcomes. In terms of life expectancy, we rank 24th in healthcare outcomes. The World Health Organization has a new term. They call it useful life expectancy. You know what they do? They take how long you live, and then they subtract from that the time you spent in a nursing home slumped over an oxygen machine in a wheelchair. The time you spend not engaged in life, not having a meaningful active life. And the average American loses 7 years of your total life in terms of useful life expectancy. Number one in the world is Japan for useful life expectancy. Their average useful life expectancy is about 77. Ours is 70, even though the average life expectancy is about 78 now. Women are just over 80, men are about 76, 77. So here's what we've learned. We've learned that I think I just won the lottery. Sorry. We've learned that there are many things that we can do that control our outcomes. But to control our outcomes, we have to learn to be good choosers. And if you're going to be a good chooser, you have to know what the good choices are. So here's the way it all works out scientifically. If you want to be healthy, there are 3 things that together, combined, create our individual phenotypes or outcomes. The first one is genetics. So genetics is a big deal, right? And we used to think when our government spent between, depending on who you talk to, and I've talked to a lot of them, $3 and $10 billion on the Human Genome Project. And we thought that when we sequenced the entire genome of one human being, we would have the answer. Boy, we'd have it. We go, okay, this causes cancer, this causes stroke, this causes whatever. Doesn't turn out that way. It turns out we did this on it was a group bigger than this, and they sequenced free 3 people, their entire sequencing. It cost $10,000 at that time to do this, and they donated 3 of them. We put them up on the wall, and I talked to a geneticist from New York who explained to me all the results of this, and we're going to show these people what it meant, what you could do with it, and the futility of it, or the future futility of it. Wasn't supposed to be, but that's what it turned out to be. What it all meant. And so when I talked to the geneticist, she took me through all the aberrations, all the mutations in the genes of these 3 people. And at the end of it, I said, okay, so what does that mean? And she said, we really don't know. 10 million, right? We will know, but it turns out that things are largely multifactorial. They're very complex. It's not one gene mutation causes one disease. It's a variety of things complexly working together at different times. And it's very, very tough to figure it all out. And computational biology will eventually do it for us, but right now we're a long way from actually being there. But genetics, as we say, does load the gun. You can be born with the genetic predisposition for one thing or not for that thing. And if you haven't chosen your parents wisely, then you've already got some problems going into the game, right? But now what's going on besides that? Because when we look at our population, we're seeing a huge rise in obesity, right? Now obesity is an absolute epidemic. We're seeing a huge rise in diabetes mellitus, type 2. Epidemic again. Well, our genes haven't changed that much. Something else is going on. Well, the other thing we used to call in my wellness talks, I called it behavior and environment. That's probably what I talked when you were there first. And that's the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food you eat, what you choose to do with your life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you exercise? All those things. Now there's a new term, epigenetics. How many of you have heard of epigenetics? Okay, pretty much everybody has. You're going to hear a lot more about it. And here's basically what happens. The epigenome is way more important than the genome. We found out now, we still don't know exactly, but there's somewhere, depending on where it sits in the end, 25 to 30,000 genes in each human being. And each one of those can mutate, and in fact, often there are mutations that regularly occur just because of luck, right? But those mutations can be examined, figured out, snuffed out, and they don't have to replicate, multiply, and cause significant cancer. All this other stuff, though, we've known was important, but we didn't really know why, and now we're finding out why. What happens with epigenetics is this. There are proteins that go to our genes and sit on top of our DNA. Epi, next to or on top of. And they actually have the ability, like a light bulb, to switch on the gene or switch off the gene's expression, or like a rheostat, to moderate the strength of expression of that gene. So you might be born with the genetic protection against breast cancer, but based on some life choices you make, you could actually switch off that protection and give yourself breast cancer. You may have every male in your family die before the age of 55 from premature heart disease, and you could live to age 90 because you do some things that modify your genetic expression and you change your phenotypical outcome. We have the power to change our health, how fast we age, whether we get dementia or not prematurely, how flexible, how strong, how our pulmonary and cardiac function can be, and we can absolutely change how much we enjoy life. And all those things are related to our behaviors and our choices of behaviors. So the first thing that we have to look at is genetics. The second one is epigenetics, and the behaviors that epigenetics involve in essentially are our environment, number one, and number two, how much we exercise, the nutrition that we have, the food that we take in. It is true, we are what we eat. 3, our ability to develop skill sets that deal with stress. And do we have stress handling abilities or not? So is our life in balance? 4th is our ability to develop healthy relationships. You just started that whole process with a big hug today. Okay? Developing relationships. It's been shown very clearly scientifically that people in relationship live longer, they age less quickly, they've got better immune systems. Isn't that interesting? The next one is attitude. Interesting that some studies just in the last 6 months have shown that one of the biggest determinants of Alzheimer's disease and the expression of Alzheimer's disease, whether or not you have the anatomy for it in your brain, is purpose in life. How's that? The people that were, by their self-survey, but had the highest quartiles of purpose in life, self-described purpose, they were the ones who had the least significant premature dementia and the least progression of Alzheimer's, even if they had the anatomy on MRI functional testing, imaging studies for Alzheimer's. So you can have the anatomy for it and not have the expression of it based on how you've trained your brain. Isn't that fascinating? And the third thing is, I think, the most powerful and probably the most interesting of all, and that's the power of the mind. And this is the mind-body connection, right? The power of the mind. Because we have the power internally to determine our own experience every day in our life. Every one of you right now has already determined the enjoyment or lack thereof that you're getting right now sitting here for this hour. You know, you can have a really bad hour if you choose to, right? Or you can figure out some way to really have a good time here. And it is that way in our life. And you know, Eckhart Tolle and the power of now and all that, it's been shown by a Harvard study, 47% of the time we're not in the now. Some studies are way more than that. And it's interesting that studies on happiness show that it's only when we're in the present moment that we can really be maximally happy. That when we're thinking about tomorrow or yesterday, we're worried about this or we're regretting that, that's what keeps us less happy, less fulfilled, less balanced, more stressed. Studies at Herb Benson, an MD that runs the Mind-Body Institute at Harvard, has done studies and brought in researchers who've pooled their data together, and what they've shown is this, that every culture that's ever been studied has had some ritualistic behavior that the culture engaged in that society of mindfulness. And it didn't really matter, it turns out, whether it's prayer or chanting or yoga or a mantra or self-hypnosis, some activity that you do that essentially turns your focus inward, typically focusing on your body or your breathing, shutting out the outside world of thoughts, and just being quiet alone in mindful meditation. And when people are in that state, and monks, for example, can go there very quickly, you know, within minutes, literally a few minutes, they can change their blood pressure, their pulse rate, their oxygen consumption, their oxygen skin temperature, oxygen utilization and skin temperature, white cell count, T4 lymphocyte count. All those things can be maximized so that every objective measurement of immune response is at its highest level when you're in that state. Now here's the other side of the coin. When you're not in that state, every physiologic parameter that can be measured is altered adversely. You're getting less oxygenation, you're metabolizing less efficiently, and your immune system is suffering because of that. Now, when people are not in that state is when they are more stressed. So to the degree that you're not there, you're over here. And to the degree that we're stressed, we're less able to handle our choices and our behaviors. That's the way it all works out. So it all works together. The mind-body thing is just critically important. And that's just the way that it works. It is that kind of a deal. So what have we learned about the mind? I got really interested in the mind because I do a lot of work with addiction. And here's what I can tell you. When I was the Chargers doctor back in the mid-'80s, I was one of 5 people that was put on a panel to decide what to do about drugs in the NFL. Not just ergogenic aids and performance-enhancing drugs, but drugs of abuse. Cocaine, methamphetamine, all the things that people use, right? Alcoholism. We had a guy, Forrest Tennant, was the NFL drug advisor, came and told us all the things that he'd just learned. He ran 9 drug in-stage addiction clinics in Southern California, but he'd studied the mind and drugs and how drugs affect the brain. And what he told us was revolutionary to me, and nobody in that room, this was at an NFL team physicians meeting, where nobody in medical school had ever been taught what he was telling us that day. And it opened up for me all the keys to how do we all be well. Because what drugs do is they act as surrogate neurotransmitters. They fool your brain into thinking that they're normal. They go past the blood-brain barrier, they hit the receptor sites, and they stimulate certain things to happen. But it's out of balance to how they would normally happen in a normal mind without that exogenous supply of stimulators. And when you do it over and over and over again, your brain actually adapts to that. And because your brain adapts to that, it starts to become accustomed and expecting it, and that's how you get tolerance, and that's when you stop using, you get withdrawal. And then in the primitive brain, not the frontal cortex where you make logical executive decisions, but in the primitive brain, there's this drive to go do it again because that's what made you feel good, and that's what you wanted. And so the brain became astoundingly important for me to understand, okay, what do people do that are addicted to get well? And can we translate that to all of us who are not addicted? Can everybody do those same things and be weller? And the whole thing now about wellness, the key is being weller than well. It's not enough just to be free of disease. What we want to do is have joy and happiness and balance and fulfillment in our lives. And that's what we want to do for our patients and guess what? For each other. Because you can't do it alone. So I was doing a research program really with the Salk Institute in La Jolla, which is the world's famous basic biology research institute. And I was speaking to a neuroscientist there, I had to interview every single scientist for about 3 hours. They had 45 world-class scientists there that did basic bench research. One of them had just discovered endorphins not too long ago. So what was one of your biggest findings? He said, I guess it was when I discovered endorphins. Oh, really? You? Oh, yeah. And so they told me about what they discovered about the brain, and I just read a new study that showed how many neurons and synapses there were, and I read that there were 100 billion neurons in the brain. This little 3-pound thing soaking wet, and I had always read 50 billion before, and so I said, tell me the truth, is it really 100 billion? And he kind of laughed at me, and he says, well, the truth is nobody's ever counted. I'm like, okay, you got me there. And he says, but that's not what's important anyway. And I said, okay, then what's important? He said, what's important is how many synapses are in your brain. And I go, okay, that's good. How many synapses are there? And he told me it was a big number, and I forgot. And I was giving a lecture at a medical conference, and I wanted to be accurate. It was on brain neurochemistry. So I emailed Sasha Dulac, who at that time was the Howard Hughes Research Fellow at the Salk. And here's the emails. I'll never forget it because it was profound. I said, Sasha, how many synapses in the brain? And she emails me back. She says, a lot. And then she went on. She said, probably on the order of 10 to the 12th to the 15th power. So I get out my little pencil, you know, and I'm starting writing zeros and counting. That's up to 1,000 trillion connections. And then she goes on to say, many of which are in a position to be modified by the biochemical sequelae of fear, compassion, or loving kindness. And I go, ooh. Here is a world-class research scientist who studies the brain for a living, and she's saying that our brain can actually change its anatomy based on our thoughts. Now, science today tells us that's true. You know, we've known this. I'll give you sort of an analogy. In recovery programs, one of the mantras is, fake it until you make it. And that seems to work, right? If you want to be happy, act happy. Soon you'll be happy. Well, here's the truth. They took this group of people. They said, okay, front row here, you all act like you're all pissed off, right? And you guys act like you're afraid. And you act like you're in love. And you act like you're frustrated and time rushed. And then they did functional MRI imaging of the brains, and they did blood metabolite measurements of neurotransmitters. And here's what they found out. The people who were acting angry had exactly the same brain highlighting and stimulation and the same neurotransmitter metabolites as the people that actually were angry. And the same with every other group. So here's what we know now about the brain. We know it's plastic. We know it's changing all the time. We know when you're in your teenage years, it totally disassembles itself, right? And it prunes itself. It's true. I'm not making this up. So when parents go, what the hell were you thinking? You know, well, I really wasn't. I don't have the synapse. So that's what happens. So your brain dewires between ages, guess what, adolescence and about 24, 25 when you end up with an adult brain. It prunes the stuff you don't need and rewires itself. But here's what, again, Rusty Gage at the Salk has discovered. He may win the Nobel Prize in the future for this. He discovered that in the hippocampus of our brains, there are adult stem cells that are dormant and can become activated to form new brain cells our entire life, even after age 90, based on our choices of behavior and thoughts. And the plasticity of our brains allow our brains to rewire itself on a regular basis, forming new connections that we use and atrophying old connections that we don't use. So if you want to act loving, pretend like you're loving, and pretty soon your brain creates connections and therefore molecules of emotion where you will actually start feeling that way. And that's the whole new thing of habit formation. Most of us live like monkeys, I hate to tell you. You know, 95, 99% of what we do is based on what we did yesterday. It is. How we get up, how we shave, how we brush our teeth, how we get dressed, how we dry off with a towel, which hand we reach for the towel for, how we drive or take our bike to work or school or whatever it is, the way we greet people, what we expect them to greet us like, all of our expectations become reality. And so my thought is, if you want to change your world, change your expectations. First, lower your expectations. It all has to do with how we choose to spend our day today. If you woke up every day and said, if I was my best self, if I really know who I am, and I chose to be the very best me today, how would I feel going through my day? And how would I treat people? And how would I discipline myself? What would I hold myself accountable for? It would be a totally different experience than most people have as a monkey brain, where we just do what we did yesterday and have the same expectations and all that. So we have the ability really to modify our outcomes. So here's where it all comes full circle. I was told the first day, the body's a unit. Body, mind, and spirit. It's all together. Right? And guess what? It is. It truly is. Secondly, we have the ability to have auto-regulation. The body can regulate itself if we'll just get out of its way. I was at a wellness conference one time with a guy from Loma Linda University and actually Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote the book on death and dying. Changed the way we look at dying patients. And this guy from Loma Linda was a wellness expert, and he said, our job as wellness doctors is to disencumber our patients from the impediments to healing. I thought, that's pretty good. In other words, we just got to get out of our own way. You know, we just have to learn to get out of our way to do the things that we would do naturally if we were man the animal. We would exercise regularly. We wouldn't be time rushed. We'd be who we are. You know, just think of all the things that you do if things were totally natural, and all those things are there together. And then structure and function are interrelated, right? Structure and function are interrelated. Fear, compassion, and loving kindness change the structure of my brain, and that changes my function. So all these things are part of the whole molecule. And what we're learning now in science is that wellness is not just something that happens, it's a skill set. It's a skill set that is a developed skill set over time, and it can be refined, and we can teach our patients to do it. And by helping them do it, we will enhance the quality of their lives and the length of their lives. And I can't promise them, and I tell them that, I can't promise you 5 extra years. Statistically, yeah, but you could get hit by the bus, right? But I guarantee you it's going to change the experience that you have today if you just pay attention to this. And for you all, I would say, you can't give your patient a nickel if you don't have a nickel. First, do it for yourself. Be whole. Know who you are. Look in the mirror. Have the courage of what I call courageous honesty. This is the truth. When we do wellness programs, it's kind of fun. We have them write, this is homework. We do these 2-3-day workshops. And the first night, their homework is to write down all the rationalizations and the lies and the baloney, why you have kept yourself stuck and felt okay with that. I'm overweight because da-da-da-da. I don't have any time to exercise because da-da-da-da. You know, I never take my pills like the doctor ordered because da-da-da-da. It's all the things, the rationalizations and lies that allow us to stay stuck, and it gives us an excuse for not being all we could be. The final homework on the last day is a new letter to themselves, and it starts with, Dear Lee, 3 words, the truth is. The truth is, these are my values. And the truth is, I haven't been living a life of my values, but I'm going to start now. And here's how I'm going to do it. Tomorrow morning at 7:30, I'm going to get up and I'm going to put my running shoes on, you know, whatever it might be. And they write down that I have control over my life, and I'm going to take control now, and I'm going to be the best me that I can be, and here's how I'm going to do it, and here's who I need on my team to support me, and here's the behaviors I've been doing that have been shooting myself in the foot. I'm not going to do those anymore. I'm going to stop the things that have not been consistent with my value system. I'm going to become the best me I can be. But we're all, remember, we're all habit creatures. We're all habit creatures. Every time one neuron in our brain fires, up to 40,000 other neurons fire in sequence. And every time those fires, those sequences go on, you ever read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers? What does it take to be world class? 2 things. First, you've got to be in the genetic pool that could be world class, but it turns out most of us are, unbelievably. And the next thing you have to have is 10,000 hours of practice. What do you think is happening in those 10,000 hours of practice? Whether it was the 29 Yankees or the, you know, the Beatles, or whether it's Mozart or Picasso, 10,000 hours of practice. And what's happening in 10,000 hours, whether you're a concert pianist or whatever, is that you're laying down neuromuscular, neural connections that create sequences of things that create habits and molecules of behavior, of thought, of memory, and expectation. That's what happens. 10,000 hours. I was at a conference where a world-class guy, he was at actually not Salk, but the UCSD Medical School. He'd won a Nobel Prize for his study of the brain. And he made a great comment. He said, neurons that fire together wire together. 1 to 40,000. And then what happens is anything that we do that even reminds us or takes us into anywhere in that sequence, not at the start, even in the middle of it, sucks us right into that whole sequence. And that's why if somebody embarrassed you when you were 6 years old that wore a red dress and smelled with certain perfume, any time the rest of your life you see red and smell that same smell and you're going to feel that same thing. And epigenetic change is interesting. This is sort of interesting. They can be passed on generation to generation. In animal models, in roundworms, it's been passed on for 40 generations. We infect them with a virus. The virus changes the way their color is on their coat, but it doesn't change their DNA sequence. It just changes the epigenetic phenotype. And it lasts for 40 generations, and then the 41st generation goes back to the normal-looking roundworm. We know that mothers who are stressed in their pregnancy produce children whose sympathetic stimulating receptor sites are much more easily affected and stimulated, and they're shaky kids. You know, they're the kids sometimes who are more reactive to any stress their entire life because of the epigenetic changes that persist generation to generation. Very, very interesting stuff. So science is telling us that AT still had it correctly. We are a unit. It is body, mind, and spirit. It can self-regulate if we become man the animal again. I say we're all athletes, just some of us are in training and some aren't. But we're all a body, and the fitness of our body, the health of our body, and the health of our mind has a lot to do with that self-regulation and how it all pumps in. Now, I'll tell you a final story, and this is a personal story about wellness and how it can happen. My wife, God bless her, she has brain cancer. December 21st, 6 years ago coming up. We got back from a 4-mile run. My kids called me and said, Dad, Mom needs you in the backyard. I go out there and she's curled up in a fetal position having a seizure. Took her to Scripps Hospital, got an MRI. Great doctor there, neurologist, very bright, Harvard trained, comes in, no people skills whatsoever. Says, yep, there's something there. Walks out. He's looking at me. Here's the patient over here. And he says to me, knowing I'm a doctor, there's something there. You want to see it? Come on. Patient's right there. Never looks at her, never speaks to her. We came back in. She said, looking at him, she says, with her hands on his face, she says, look at me. She says, do you realize what you just did to me when you walked out of the room and said that? And you could see for the first time, he didn't really get it, but he almost got it. He was close. He was close. Could have been a primary care doc, but no. So we're there in the hospital. We stayed there. We're there over through Christmas. We had Christmas night in the hospital, Christmas Eve in the hospital. They got me a pillow. I slept actually in the ICU underneath her bed on the tile floor. They brought me a pillow. My kids brought me a blanket. We held hands as long that night as we could until we both kind of fell asleep. Next morning we woke up and our kids had brought in stockings with presents for us, right? And we had Christmas breakfast on the floor. They brought that in too. As a family, my 2 daughters, Mary and myself. In retrospect, we all agreed that was the best Christmas Eve and the best Christmas we'd ever spent as a family. Because guess what? We were mindful of what that moment meant and how fleeting life can be and how precious every one of those moments can be for us and how we better appreciate them or we're blowing it. And as I'm driving away from the hospital, Mary says to me, you know, I've made a decision. I said, what's that? She said, well, if this tumor's going to be in my brain, she had a 5-centimeter tumor in her right temporal lobe, too deep to operate on. She says, if this is going to be in my brain for the rest of my life, however long that is, I've decided there's going to be no room, either my brain or my heart, for anything other than gratitude, hope, or love. I go, whoa. This is somebody that's just been given basically a terminal illness diagnosis, and that's her attitude. And that's the way she's lived her life. There has been no effort for anything other than those things. So fast forward then to about maybe 4 weeks later, she calls a family meeting. Our daughters are both grown and out, but she calls them in. We have a meeting. She says, do you want to know why I called this dinner meeting? I said, yes. She says, well, I've announced that I want to tell you that I've named my tumor. All right, great, good for you. Do you want to know why? She says, I said, yes, I'd like to know why. Well, she says, I figure if this brain is going to have this tumor in it, and it's going to be there for the rest of my life, then I better get to know who it is. Would you like to know what her name is? Yes. Gwendolyn. Would you like to know why? Yes. Throw me a bone here. You know? She says, well, I've never known anybody named Gwendolyn before, so I have no preconceived ideas of who she is. She said, my most intimate relationships, other than with you, have always been with women. And so if I'm going to get to know who she is, then I figure she ought to be a woman. I don't know who she is, so my job is to create a safe place in my brain so Gwendolyn and I can live a long time, and she doesn't have to feel like she's fighting me. She doesn't have to get angry and grow fast. She can just be complacent and be happy and be who she is, and she can be happy for me being who I am. We can both be happy together and be at peace and live a really long, happy life together and get to know each other as respected partners in this life and maybe have a little love fest with each other. She says, do you think I'm crazy? I go, no, I think that's brilliant. Fast forward to another couple months, and we're walking along the bay in San Diego. We're talking about some of the things she's lost. She can't drive anymore. She can't be left alone anymore because she has seizures every day. She gets headaches. She can't walk. She can walk, but not alone. She can't run at all. Can't go to the gym like she used to. Can't be around loud noises or lights or things because they cause seizures. So we're just talking about how it felt and some of the sort of sadness that comes along with some of that. And she says, yeah, but I'll tell you what I can still do. I said, okay, what's that? And she says, well, I can still look with my eyes, and I can feel with my heart, and I can say yes to the world. I go, well, now you tell me, is Mary Rice well, or is she sick and diseased? And is there a way to be weller than well? And is there a way that we can all say yes to our world? So here's my plea to you. Get it, first of all. Know where you're going. Know who you are. Look in the mirror and have that courageous conversation with yourself and write yourself a letter, love letter, starting with the truth is, right? Be grateful for your many, many, many blessings. I am so grateful that I came to Kirksville, Missouri and started my life professionally here with Mary, with all the wonderful role models that I learned about here, that I got to be friends with here, that I was rubbing up against here, that taught me the kind of person that I wanted to be as a physician and allowed me to incorporate osteopathic philosophy and practice into not only my professional life, but my personal life. Because we are the osteopathic profession. Whatever your specialty is that you practice, those three tenets, and the fourth tenet, the way to practice medicine properly is to integrate those first three tenets, right? C number one. That's the deal. So be proud of it. Be grateful for it. Be glad people like Dr. Tenning had vision enough to perpetuate the osteopathic philosophy and practice. Be glad that you've got the brains and the ability to become the clinical health providers that you're becoming. Know how important you can be in the lives of your patients. And know this too. A friend of mine, Paul Brenner, wrote this wonderful book. It's called Buddha in the Waiting Room. And he's talking about physicians. He says, every patient in your waiting room can be your Buddha, can teach you a truth that you don't know about yourself, and can help you heal. So the bottom line was your patients can heal you if you're going to be humble enough to allow them to. So partner with each other in your classes. Realize the importance of community, because community is key. Realize the importance of being your best self, and then go out in the world and spread this, because osteopathic philosophy is wellness on steroids. We've always had it. We've tried for so long as a profession to be equal to those other guys. In many ways, we're better than, and we always have been better than, in terms of the holism. And that's the difference. That's what makes us unique and different. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm so grateful that I had the osteopathic education. I'm glad that I'm standing here right now and sharing this moment with you, and I'm glad you're here sharing it with me. I love you all. I wish you well. Say yes to your lives. Thank you.
Now you know. Anybody else heart beating a little fast right now? Is it just me? I don't think it's just me. Thank you so much, Dr. Rice. Thank you, Mary, for coming here. Thank you for inspiring us and for being a great role model for our students, our faculty, for the people you've touched over the years. For Dr. Phelps, he looks at you and sees one of his role models. Thank you.
I should say, when I look at President Phelps, sorry to say that. When he got it, I called him, I said, "Can you believe this?" No, he's done so much for our profession, and there's so many people here that have, and we all stand on the shoulders of many people before us who've been just so terrific, and I just want to acknowledge all that Craig has done in his life. He's been a mentor to a lot of people. I feel like I've learned right alongside of him. I haven't been a mentor. I've just been a buddy and colleague and watching him doing what he's doing, hoping I could keep up. So thank you.
Again, thank you. Dr. Lovey this morning spoke after Dr. Rice, and the lecture that Dr. Rice gave, and actually all of the lectures that we're doing for Founders Day are going to be available on Blackboard for you guys. Dr. Rice's presentation this morning, he just took a whole bunch of topics from the audience and just basically did a whole bunch of things that you see us teach you, and it's a really good review, and it's a nice way of seeing how somebody who is a few years after graduation has been continuing to use the things that we teach you in the OTM lab and in the Blumenthal lab and use it, and has been successful treating people for years. Well, at least a year or two. Okay, and part of the reason why I'm talking now is to just provide a buffer because, as Dr. Lovey said, he's a hard act to follow. Dr. Rice is a hard person to follow. So I'm just going to throw in a couple things. In front of everybody and available at the door was this Founders Day tinning lecture pamphlet, and has, it was one of the neat things that we do is that all the students from the second year go in to, greet and talk to the first year class in the Blumenthal lab, and they surround them. One of the things that amazed me is how many people are from the second year and probably in the first year class who are from out of state. 75% of their students or more are from out of state. And, we continue to draw people from all over the country, all over the world even. And they come here not just because of the great fall colors and, the excellent teaching staff. They come because of that sense of history that they get from being at the founding school. And so you'll notice on page 3 is the history of the Tinning Founders Day Osteopathic Lecture. And you did such a great job of incorporating and talking about the history throughout your presentation. I'm just going to cut down like 3 paragraphs to just say that Dr. Tinning was the 8th president of the ATSU, serving in the capacity from 1984 to 1996. Because of his exceptional service to the university, the AT Still University Board of Trustees named that the Tinning Education Center building on the Kirksville campus in his honor. Dr. and Mrs. Tinning reside in Lansing, Michigan. And just so you know, he's still around and somebody that you can contact and say, hey, we really appreciate what you did for the university. And then moving on a little bit more, we have following immediately after this is going to be the AT Still honorary ceremony here. And then right after that, at 4:30, is the Evening with the Stars, where the people who are attending our CME program are going to be staying there and, who've been in practice. So you're practicing physicians that you can go and basically pick their brain and say, hey, how do you treat my ankle? And they'll treat your ankle and teach you a few things along the way. So these great opportunities for you to learn. And now having said all that, I can finally go ahead and present you with this fancy plaque that says the Tinning Founders Day Osteopathy Lecture, October 16, 2014, presented at E. Lee Rice, DO, FAAFP, FAOASM, class of 73, AT Still University, Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine, ATSU. Thank you again, and congratulations. Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, yeah, here's the way it evolved. When I started my practice, I was basically in family medicine, and I had this idea because of some things I'd done during my residency of how great it would be to show people, because I'd already started working with the Chargers as a resident, and I saw that what we were doing to treat injuries, for example, with the Chargers was way different than what we were being taught to do with the Marines in my family medicine residency. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great to be able to show the lay public the same level of care that we're treating elite athletes with for their musculoskeletal injuries primarily. And so that was the initial thought of it. And then that was sort of the morphing of the whole deal. It started out with, let's treat injuries better for everybody. And then it's, why don't we teach everybody how to prevent injuries? So let's go into prevention as well as treatment. And so how do we rehab things better? How do we prevent them better? And then it became, well, how do we get athletes performing better on the field of competition? So what is it they need to do with training, with nutrition, with mind-body, with sports psychology, all those things to have people between the lines when the whistle blows perform at their very highest level. And then the question was, well, why don't we teach everybody to do that in their life, whether they're competing with somebody else with a number on their jersey or not? How about just be the best dad, be the best mom, be the best friend, be the best worker, be the best colleague that you could possibly be? Let's teach everybody about high performance. And now the final morphed thing right now is, let's have high performance and high health. Let's do both. So let's teach everybody about what they can do to change their own outcomes. Let's give them the tools, let's give them the instruments, let's give them the science so they can make healthy choices for themselves. My experience is that most people don't know the prices they're paying for the choices that they're making. They're clueless. It's like they don't know. If you don't know what the pros and cons of each choice are, how can you make an intelligent choice? So what I have learned for me, I get bored kind of just treating disease. I get more inspired myself just treating people and helping them become more than, right? So what people want, they want education, they want inspiration, they want somebody to partner with them as a respected, trusted partner in a lifelong progression of always more better health. And when something goes wrong, sure, you take care of that too. But let's help people not have things go wrong. Let's be an instrument in their health and their wellness. Let's teach them all to be weller than well. And in doing that, we develop relationships. And the relationship, it turns out, is probably as important, if not the most important thing in our ability, I think, to reach our patients and make meaningful changes in their life. If we know them, they know us, we trust each other, they know we care, then they're going to listen to what we tell them, going to be much more apt to be honest with us and tell us the whole truth about what's going on, warts and all, this is me. And that's what we've tried to do. Our Wellness Center has been an attempt to create an environment where people can feel safe being who they are, not feeling judged, and come for education, inspiration, hand-holding, coaching, and life transformational changes. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking. Great question. Any other questions? Yes?
What is your
Yeah, the question is, what's my mission statement in life? It's changed a little bit. Originally it was to help people heal. And now it's more, it's short, it's cryptic, it's short. It's to be the best me that I can be. It's actually, my mission statement is to return the gift. Here's my view. We all have one basic gift in life, the most important, precious gift we could ever give back to the world, and that's the gift of our true, authentic, unadulterated self. And so my mission statement is to return the gift of my life to life itself. So in doing so, I become all of me, and I give you all of me too, and I want all of you. So that's my mission, is to learn who I am. I mean, the subtitle is to learn who I am, to grow, to participate in the journey of life with gratitude. And it's a mission of love, really. It's all really about, I think we all can come from a position of love or fear. It is one or the other. You can label them different things, but distill it down to their cores. We're either acting out of love or out of fear. If you're ever in a tough situation and you're not sure what to do, ask yourself that question. Am I reacting out of love or out of fear? And am I being mindful of my choice and aware of the consequences? So thank you for asking that. Other? Yes?
An easier one for you.
Good, thanks.
What book is sitting on your nightstand?
Oh, right now? You know, Mary, what is that? No, I just got one. I'm sorry? Oh, The Agent, yeah. I was just at a program where Lee Steinberg, The Agent, that the movie, what was that movie? Pardon me? No, that wasn't, the movie was, yeah, Jerry Maguire. Yeah. Lee Steinberg was the most powerful agent in professional sports history. And he wrote a book called The Agent. And it's a story about his life. And it's basically about his rise and fall. And he was the most powerful agent ever. He had something like 41 number one NFL draft choices. He had like 6 quarterbacks that were all the all-pro quarterbacks on his agenda right there at one time. He got the biggest contracts. He gave them really interesting concepts about if you're going to sign this big contract, then what are you going to give back to the world? What are you going to commit to giving back to the world as you sign as part of your sort of tithing back in gratitude for what you have and all the gifts that you have? And they made the movie about him, and then he became a consultant for a number of other movies, and he was on Oprah, and you know, all the he was the guy. And then he went into the depths of addiction himself and lost everything, and now he's coming back. And he wrote that book, and he tells a story, and now he's going to be a better agent than he ever was before. He's doing a lot of work with concussion in athletes and helping organizations fund programs to understand and do research on concussions. And so, yeah, that's I haven't read it yet, but I just got it from him. He signed me a nice copy, and I'm waiting to read that, but that's what's on my thing right now. Usually what I get a lot of medical stuff at the office, so at night what I like to read is sort of introspective things, philosophical things. Yes? Yes. Thanks for that. I've got a ton of those. I don't try to do this, but literally I deal with addiction every day because it's that common. Statistically, it's about 13 to 14% of our population has the genetic predisposition for addiction. And so it comes in many forms. It comes in drug addiction, alcoholism, gambling addiction, sex addiction, workaholism, relationship addiction. You name the addiction. It's an obsessive, compulsive, repetitive behavior in some way to take you away from your feeling self because your feelings are uncomfortable and haven't got the skill set or the brain neurochemistry to allow you to feel comfortable and safe in your own skin. And so that's kind of the deal. So have I got a particular case? I've got so many that are pretty wonderful. I'll tell you one that was sort of a full circle for me. It was one of the reasons that after 16 years as the Chargers doctor that I left the Chargers, being totally candid with you all. This is a fellow, I'll have to shorten this because it's a long story, but it's very interesting. He was a nose guard, all-pro for the Chargers, and one night he got beat up outside of a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning by 4 guys with lead pipes that were on methamphetamine. And apparently he'd made a pass at one of their girlfriends or something in the bar, and so they went home. That guy got his buddies, came back, and let him have it. So he's in the hospital, and he's got broken ribs. His bruised and battered body was just lying there. He actually fractured his eye socket and was losing vision out of one eye, had to have surgery to reorient the socket and so forth. And his wife asked me in the ICU of the hospital, would you please talk to me? I think my husband's got a problem. I said, sure. And there were security guards on either end of the ward because they were afraid, the security guards were, the police was, that somebody would come back and try and finish him off because they were looking for these guys for attempted murder. And so they were very, very security conscious. So we had no place private to go, so there's a broom closet, literally. So I said, yeah, let's try this, and it turned out to be a broom closet. So I spent literally 40 minutes in the broom closet with his wife in the hospital ICU, surgical ICU. And she said, my husband's an alcoholic, and I need some help, and I've been to the coach, and he won't help me, and I've been to the trainer, and he won't help me. Will you help me? And I said, yes, I will. So we went, I said, tomorrow morning he'll be a little bit out of the drugs and his mentation will be better, so let's go talk to him. She said, okay. So I show up the next morning, and his father's there in the bed, and his father actually came from, I think, Missouri, but he had a very distant relationship with his father. They didn't get along, and he had told me that he was really angry at his dad and so forth, and so we come in expecting to do this one-on-one intervention, and there's his father that he hates sitting in the chair. So I go, okay, this won't work. So I just acted like I was making routine rounds, and I turned around and left and walked down the hallway. And as I'm walking down the hallway, there's this tap on my shoulder, and it's his father. And he says, doctor, can I speak to you? And I said, sure. He says, I'm afraid my son's an alcoholic. And I said, will you talk to me? And because his relationship was distant with the son, he didn't have a good relationship with the son's wife either, so they hadn't talked. So I said, interesting you should say that. His wife just said the same thing. Would you be willing to go back in the room and both share what you're feeling right now with him? And boy, they were unbelievable. They did. And they poured their hearts out. And his father said, every time I get a phone call, I'm afraid it's the police telling me they found you and you're dead. And his wife said, I'm so afraid that you're going to lose the kids, and the kids aren't seeing you when you're home, and when you are home, you're not there. And we're just falling apart, and I don't think our family can make this. And so it was one of those deals where their whole life was in trouble. And so we went in. I said, I'll call him Tom. I said, Tom, your dad and your wife have both come to me and told me something that's very concerning to them and very significant. They love you a lot. They'd like to help you. Would you be willing to talk to us in honesty? And he said, is it about my drinking? And I said, as a matter of fact, it is. And he says, well, on one condition. And I said, what's that? He says, that you never tell anybody else. I said, okay, you got it. He says, and if you do, I'll kill you. He's a 320-pound nose guard. I go, okay, Scout's honor, I won't. So he went into treatment. He went into the Betty Ford Center. He did a great job. The team actually said, we're not going to have you on our team. They got rid of him, traded him right away because the owner didn't want to have to pay him because he was very sorry when he was sick. Actually, they came to the hospital bedside and said, don't worry, we're going to pay everything for you until you're back on our team. We're doing great. And the minute he called him from the Betty Ford Center and said, I've decided I've got a problem with alcohol and I got help for myself, they stopped paying us checks and traded him away. The good news is he joined another team, was an all-pro for that team for the next 4 or 5 years in a row, and the coach of that team was a friend of mine. He called me and he said, you know, he is the model in our locker room. He's honest. He knows who he is. He's willing to be that person. He doesn't take a bunch of baloney from anybody else. He raises the entire level of relationship in our locker room and with the families. He's a great family guy. He's got his family back. His kids are doing well. And a number of years after that, the bottom line of the story was every year they have a rookie symposium. So all the NFL rookies who become drafted have this 3-day seminar where they try and incorporate them into the NFL and tell them what to watch out for. You know, don't go for loose women, don't gamble, stay away from drugs, you know, da-da-da-da-da. This was just when the AIDS epidemic was happening, and they were warning them all about AIDS and how you get AIDS and all that business. And they had 3 old veterans up on stage in front of all these rookies. One was this player, Tom. One was Marcus Allen, Heisman Trophy winner and obviously all-pro for the Raiders, and the other one was an all-pro middle linebacker for, I think, Atlanta. But somebody you'd all know his name. I don't want to mention it right now. And anyway, they're up there, and the rookies were saying, well, what advice would you give to us? And so the first 2 guys give some fairly erudite advice, and then Tom gets up and he says, I'll tell you one piece of advice you should all pay attention to. He said, whatever team you're on, find somebody on that team that you trust, that you respect, that you can be totally honest with, and that'll help you with your life. And he says, for me, I found him in Dr. Rice back there, and I was back there just trying to be a fly on the wall, you know. And he said, because he's the one who saved my life and my family's life. And that made it all come full circle to me, because I had left the Chargers because of that incident. And for him to get up in front of all the rookies and say that was a very meaningful thing for me, and told me that he got it and made it all that more rewarding. So thank you for asking. Other questions? Yes?
With your articles, you mentioned a lot of the same risk factors or issues that kept coming up, you know, obesity,
Yeah.
poor nutrition, lack of activity. Is there something that you feel has been successful when you talk with your patients, or something that you recommend that we can tell our patients to kind of encourage them to be proactive in their own health and wellness?
Sure. The question, I don't know if you could hear it, but we mentioned a number of similar things that help patients' wellness, and can I express to you some things that you could tell your patients to encourage them to be active. The first is, you know, patients, they don't want to be made fun of, they don't want to be dehumanized, they don't want to be judged. Most people know what they're doing wrong. They know they've done it wrong. They've tried to quit smoking 5,000 times, they just haven't been able to, and they're afraid to try again because they don't want to look at themselves as failures. So I think the most important thing we can do for them is be real, be human, be honest, share our true self with them, and be a role model. Do it yourself. Go first, you know. And if you do it for yourself, and they know you're flawed too, but in spite of your flaws, you're on the ladder, you're on the path, you're trying, your journey is upward, then they're willing to partner with you. And I try and inspire, yeah, sure, here's where you are. What we do, our methodology is this. We gather all the information with our exam, with their past medical history, with their review of systems, all that. All in, we sit down with them and say, okay, here's what we know. Here's where you are today, without judgment. This is just it. These are your risk factors. Now, where would you like to be? Let's just take a year from now. Let's take it one step at a time. Where would you like to be? All right? How are we going to get you there? What do you need? Who do you need on your team? How can I be useful to you in that journey? What do you need to do? What are you willing to commit to do? How can I help you learn how to do that? Get the skills? Who do I need to plug you into? Do you need coaching? Do you need information? Do you need inspiration? Do you need facts? You know, what is it? Where are you on the, you know, the stages of change model? And what can I do to help you and inspire you and to be a good, respected partner for you? There was a guy that wrote a book, Norman Cousins, wrote a book called The Anatomy of an Illness. And in that book, he talks about his own diagnosis of incurable disease. And he was in the hospital being filled with all these drugs, and he just couldn't stand it. And he checked himself out with his doctor's agreement, moved across the street to the hotel, had friends come in and show Marx Brothers movies up on the wall, and says he laughed himself back to health. Now, he was a physician and a very well-respected one. And he wrote a book about it called Anatomy of an Illness. And he said, the most important thing my doctor did for me was he acted as a respected partner in my journey back to health. And I think that's the deal. It's to be a respected partner, not to be a doctor with a white coat up on a pedestal telling people how to live their lives, being a human being who truly cares about them, and they will know that. You know, patients get that real quickly. Are you honest? Do you really care? Are you concerned about them? Because if you love me and you're concerned about me and you've got some information I don't have, then I'd like to have you help me because I want to be better. I just don't want to feel judged. That's the deal. You know, they don't, and it's our flaws. I don't know if you remember, Thornton Wilder had this wonderful play that he wrote, and there was a scene in about the pool at Bethesda. And this pool was where people went to get healed. And there was a doctor who wanted to go into that pool too because he wanted to be healed because he was melancholy and depressed. And when all the people came, he started to go. He wanted to be the first one in the pool because he wanted to be healed so he could help his patients more. And the angel of mercy came down and said, draw back. She said, without your wound, where would your power be? She said, it's the very wound you have. It's your melancholy voice. She says, in the world of healing, she said, only the wounded soldiers can serve in God's world of love and healing. She says, only the wounded soldiers can serve in God's army. She says, draw back. And the message is, our patients don't want us to wear this fake mask pretending like we're perfect. They want to know you were human beings. But they want to know we truly care about them. And they want to know that we're there to help them. And whatever it is we have to do to be useful to them, we're willing to make that commitment to do that. And if they really believe that, they'll go there for you. They'll go there for themselves. They'll go there for themselves. I'll tell you one other analogy, because this is kind of cool. Can I take another minute? We're good? Okay. So there's a coach. There's a guy, I saw this in Parade magazine, you know, that Sunday section that comes out every week. Well, on the cover of Parade magazine, the title is The Most Important Coach in America. And so I thought, well, I'm a sports medicine doctor. I like this, so I'll read this. It's about this guy, Joe Ehrmann. Joe Ehrmann was an all-pro for the Baltimore Colts. He's a defensive lineman, a big guy. They had a picture of him standing there with his face mask and his helmet on. He's all muddy. He looked like he, was about 6'5", maybe 270, and he looked like he'd just rip your heart out if you looked at him the wrong way. He just looked like an ugly, mean guy. And the story was about him, most important coach in America. He was the assistant high school football coach at a little private school called Gorman in, I think it was Gorman, anyway, in the Baltimore area. It was about him basically going back and trying to prove in the inner city that there's more to life than just being famous or rich or whatever. And it told the story about how they'd won 5 state championships in a row, but he was doing it with an entirely different methodology, and he was starting with boys. He said, if we want to change the culture of America, he said, we teach boys the 3 lies of masculinity. The first is that what you're valuable for is basically how good of an athlete you are when you're young. Those are the kids that get the most prestige, the most applause, the most attaboys when they're young, the ones that are just naturally the fastest, that can kick the ball in the net, that can catch the ball, whatever it might be. He says, as they get older, then it's who gets the prettiest girl. So it's sexual conquest. And those are the ones that have the pretty homecoming queen, they're the ones that get most adoration. And then as they get older, it's power in the boardroom. And he who has the fanciest car, the most money, the biggest job, the best title, he's the one that gets the acclaim. And that's our view of success. And his view was, if we want to change the world, we've got to change the view of success. And it can't be how much stuff can you get, how much can you acquire, how much power do you have over other people. It's got to be service. It's, do you know who you are, again? And basically, are you built for others, in his words? Are you built for service for others, trying to help and make the world a better place? And so he started to develop this model at the small little high school, and he was so dynamic. The book was great. There's a book written by him by a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Jeffrey Marks. The book is called Season of Life. And it's about, they were ripping down the Colt Stadium. This author started interviewing players who had played there and just had memories. He came across Joe Ehrmann, and he remembered this author actually was a water boy for the Colts when Joe was an all-pro. And I guess he was a hellion. And he was one of those guys that was the life of the locker room. Joe's life changed when his younger brother, who he idolized, died. He says, as I was shoving dirt onto his grave, I really thought to myself, is this really all there is? He says, there's got to be more to life than this, and more we can do while we're in life. And so he started essentially teaching young men how to be built for others. And they told the story about how they get him in the room before the coach comes in, or the official does, says, 2 minutes, coach. And he gets all the team there, and they take their helmets off, they get down on one knee, they listen for the pregame speech, right? Here's the pregame speech. He gets up in front of the team, he says, what's your job? Or, I'm sorry, he says, what's our job? The head coach is right by him. He says, what's our job? And the kids all yell out in unison, to love us. And then he says to them, what's your job? And they all yell out in unison, to love each other. Pre-game speech, right? They go out at 5 championships. I called him. I said, I don't know you, but I was on the sideline for many years when you were playing with the Chargers and you were with the Colts. I said, I just wanted to say, great book. I read about what you're doing with those kids and your views of life. Keep it up. It's a good job. He said, funny you call me. I spent last week in the hospital with hypertension that was uncontrolled. And I said, when's the last time you had a physical? He says, well, it was when I retired years ago. I said, why don't you come out and I'll give you a physical and we can get to know each other. So he came out, spent 3 days with us, stayed married in my house. Great guy. He was so inspiring. This is the punchline. I had him come back the next year and speak to all the private schools coaches in San Diego County. So we're in a room about this big with this many coaches. And he says, here's what I want you to do. He says, I want you to draw 2 squares on the piece of paper in front of you. And he says, now think of this. Everybody in this room has some coach in the past when they were growing up and playing on sports teams that humiliated you. Somebody that shamed you and made you feel worse about yourself, embarrassed you in front of your teammates, and really emotionally sort of scarred you. It was tough for you. He says, think about who that was and write their initials in that little square, one of the squares, and then raise your hand when you're done. Within 20 seconds, every coach had a hand up. Everybody had that experience, and it was so emotionally hurtful, painful, that that's the amygdala hijack, we call it. That stored, emotionally painful memory is stored in the amygdala of your brain. Everybody knew it. And now he says, okay, think of some coach you had when you were young or teacher who, when you were feeling not so good about yourself, who validated you. Somebody who built you up and made you feel good about yourself and made you feel worthy and made you want to try harder and be more and get up off the ground and try it again, dust yourself off, because they believed in you, they validated your worth, and they made you feel good, even better than you felt about yourself. Think of that person and write those initials down and raise your hand. 10 seconds. Well, everybody had that one too, right? 100% of them. This is the lesson. He says, now every athlete you have on your teams, you have an opportunity to be in one of those squares. Which square do you want to be in? Every patient you have an opportunity to be in one of those squares. They can feel neglected, they can feel like a number, they can feel judged, they can feel discounted, like you don't really care, don't have time for them, they don't matter. Or you can reach in to their hearts and you can make them feel validated and worthwhile and worthy and give them the inspiration and the courage to try again, to be more. And every patient you touch, that is an option. So think about those 2 squares for your own careers. It was meaningful to me. Other question? Okay. Thank you very much again.